like a beacon inside a mall is very valuable because the user could be on level 1, level 2, level 3 of a mall, and a beacon helps determine that. The way that we look at it is like, remember back in the early 2000s, everyone operated their own website? And then Google just came along and said, we'll serve the ads and we'll just cut you in. Yeah. That's kind of like where beacons are today. You've got a lot of companies managing their own little infrastructure pieces, but advertisers just want to access the whole thing in a really easy fashion. So that's kind of the layer where Airmarket fits in. Well, the reasons to be cheerful are all the advertisers and agencies that we meet when we go in and demo and we show them, a sponsored notification coming from a third-party app. They get super excited. So for us, that's great because ultimately they're the ones that are paying for it. JC&Co, who are the outdoor furniture company, they're using beacons as a way for them to be able to track and analyze people that service their out-of-home units. So instead of manually logging that down on a piece of paper, I was, on the corner of 34th and 3rd, and I had to, fix the outdoor panel. That is being automated via a beacon in the panel and an app that's loaded on the production guy's device.
You're listening to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Beacosystem with Steve Statler.
Welcome to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Beacosystem. This week we are talking to Andrew Davis, who is the co-founder and COO of Airmarket. He's based in New York. So, Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Stephen. Pleasure.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about beacon networks. And if we think about where the beacon ecosystem, proximity, location, marketing ecosystem is, scale is a critical success factor. And I believe that networks are a key to us achieving that scale. And you've started a company that helps to make that possible. And so we'll be talking about what you guys do, your view of the marketplace. And, when you first started in this business, you set up a different company, Tapit, is that right?
That's right.
How did Tapit become Airmarket?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So Tapit was originally all about connecting physical objects to the internet. And so that was built at the beginning of 2011. And the primary technology that we were using there to connect physical objects to the internet was using near-field communications. And the beauty of that technology was users weren't required to download an app. So they could just tap on various objects, and these brand owners or clients could deliver various information and content over the internet. The challenge with near-field communications, even till today, is that it's not compatible with iPhone. So iPhone only uses NFC for Apple Pay, and then any other type of interactivity with the NFC controller is locked. And so for us to scale the company to the vision that we originally founded the company on was very difficult, because if you can't cater to an iPhone audience, you're pretty much, cutting off a huge chunk of a brand's audience, especially in the US, Canada, Australia, and the UK. So
I actually heard, obviously you're from Australia. I think most people can tell that from your accent. Yeah. And I heard that there were some Australian banks that are actually suing Apple to try and open up the NFC access for their payment. So I hope they get somewhere with that. But
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
But we went back to the drawing board. We obviously got traction with the product, but we could never scale with clients to the level that we had envisioned. So we went back to the drawing board and took all those learnings that we gathered across the journey with Tapit and said, well, what technologies can we use in a similar way but is compatible with all devices? And that's sort of how the genesis of Airmarket was born. And that was back in 2015.
2015. So you've been at this for a couple of years. How big is the company and where are your people?
Yeah, so we've got 6 staff. Myself in the US. We've got a lead sales guy in London in the UK. and then tech and our CEO are based back in Sydney.
All right.
And so that's where the business is headquartered.
And tell us about the platform and what the service you offer. It's basically like a three-sided network, is that right?
Yeah, so the one thing that we noticed, and it's still evident today with beacons, to your point, is it's very fragmented. So there's lots of companies that are playing on both sides of the fence in terms of there's lots of companies providing beacons and rolling them out for various customers. But that's fragmented from an advertiser perspective. So if an advertiser wants to access some beacons, they'd have to approach each of these individual companies that are rolling out beacons. So what Airmarket is trying to do is aggregate all those beacons on one side, so the beacon owner can make revenue from that infrastructure that's already deployed out in the field. Mm-hmm. And the advertiser benefit there is that they don't need to invest in any type of hardware each time they want to do a campaign. And so think of that like an Uber-style approach where rather than just operating one taxi by yourself, you're able to operate many cars at once. And then on the other side is, because beacons require an app on someone's phone, is we work with third-party apps to be able to deliver notification from those beacons. Mm-hmm. And so a core part of our remit is to partner with large apps, which allows an advertiser to deliver many notifications to their consumers as they're coming into proximity of these various beacon networks across the world.
So you've got advertisers that are paying to get access, hooks into existing apps that have distribution, so they don't have to worry about creating an app and all the risk and cost that goes with that. So they have a known quantity in terms of the app coverage and install base, and you're linking those apps to a network of beacons, and presumably the advertiser pays for this, and who gets the money? Do you share it with people with beacons and the app owners? Is that the idea?
Yeah, we share it on all sides. So in terms of that value chain, each part of the puzzle is adding value. Mm-hmm. The beacon is adding value because you're able to determine exactly where someone is to a very close range. Mm-hmm. And then we're obviously sharing revenue with the app because they're playing an important role in being able to access the consumer on their device.
And how far have you got in terms of building this up? It's notoriously difficult to start these things.
That's a really good point. Because it's so early, these things do take time. Mm-hmm. So we've just recently signed our first app partnership with a company called AirPush. Mm-hmm. And the beauty of AirPush is, rather than us approaching individual apps one by one, they have thousands of apps within their network. And so we provide our SDK to AirPush, who then deploy it into those thousands of apps. So it kind of gives us scale by doing one deal rather than doing 1,000 individual deals.
Cool.
And then we're in the process of obviously partnering with more apps as well as companies that have beacons deployed in the field.
So what kind of apps does AirPush have in their network?
Very, very long tail apps, Stephen. So think gaming apps, apps like Flashlight, and etc. So, we're not talking Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and those style of apps. Mm-hmm. It's apps that have decent user base mm-hmm. when added together.
Yeah.
But the core need or want from the apps themselves is they really need to make money from their apps.
Yeah.
And the beauty with Airmarket and the notifications is the consumer doesn't have to be inside the app for the notification to be delivered. So unlike an ad banner where users need to be inside the app for the app to make money, this is, call it an incremental revenue stream for those apps.
Okay, so I might be playing solitaire, or I might have played solitaire at one point. It doesn't really matter. I get these notifications that pop down from the top of my screen. What kind of message would be in the notification? What's the user experience like?
Yeah, so that's something that we're currently educating advertisers on.
Mm-hmm.
So it can't be general awareness type messages, because that fits the old sort of above the line media approach. But for push notifications, because one, it's a mobile device, it's very personable, and because we know the location of a consumer, it has to add value to the context of the consumer. Mm-hmm. So it could be an offer, it could be entry into a competition, it could be exclusive content from, say, a Netflix or an Amazon, but it has to add value to the consumer. It can't be something like, hey, I've just launched my new TV ad, because then all people in the value chain lose, especially the advertiser.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the rule is it has to add value. It can't just be welcome to the store notice or why don't you go here. How are you getting to the advertisers? You're based in New York. That seems like a pretty good start.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons why we set up in New York. Obviously, it's the mecca of advertising globally, and where all the global decisions are made, all the big agencies are here. Mm-hmm. So our primary path to market with advertisers is working with the media agencies, and a core feature of our platform is making the process of purchasing notifications programmatic. As you know, most digital and mobile media is going to that programmatic, automated style of buying and analysing. And so a key feature that we're trying to incorporate with Airmarket is being able to integrate with those programmatic platforms so they can buy some notifications in exactly the same way that they buy some video ads, some mobile banners. And so it becomes part of their mobile tactics when they're doing these various advertising campaigns.
And are there specific programmatic advertising platforms that you are targeting that you would like to work with? Or?
Yeah, so in terms of the market, there's 5 core trading desks, if you will, that are controlled by the 5 large agency groups. Mm-hmm. So Cadrian is a trading desk that is owned and operated by Interpublic Group, Xaxis for WPP, Acuin for OMD or Omnicom, and then for Publicis you have, the name escapes me, but it's pretty much 5 trading desks control the bulk of programmatic advertising. And so we're primarily focused on working with those guys to be able to deliver these new types of mobile ads programmatically.
And how close have you got to getting one of those links built?
Well, unfortunately, the process with programmatic is you don't just have to integrate with the trading desk. There's a range of other stakeholders that need to be integrated with. One being an ad server to serve the ad. So that could be a double click, it could be a seismic, and then the other one is the SSP, so a Rubicon or an AppNexus or something like that. So we're currently working with those guys to try and get it to a phase where it is pure programmatic, but there's still a way to go to make that happen.
And what does the SSP do?
The SSP allows us to upload our inventory to which then plugs into various trading desks. So the 5 that I just mentioned, as well as a range of other sources that might be interested in purchasing advertising.
Okay, I've just decoded the acronym. So that's sales side platform? Is that
sell side platform? Right. Exactly. Okay. And then think of the trading desk as a demand side platform.
Okay. All right. And what about the data management platform? Isn't that another component?
Well, yeah, the agencies might have their own DMP, but essentially that's what the ad server is trying to manage in that relationship, is because the ad is being served by the agency or the trading desk preferred ad server. Okay. All the analytics and data is being housed in that repository. And then whatever's served is obviously being analysed and collected by Airmarket as well.
And so what are the bits that you've built so far? Because presumably you can have a directory of beacons, you need some APIs into apps, you need to collect the metadata that describes the significance of the beacons. How far have you got with that?
Yeah, so at the moment, Airmarket is, for the advertisers, it's a managed service. So it's not programmatic today. In terms of what we've built is the platform that can onboard third-party beacons, and then we're able to label them in the database to understand where they are, what's near those beacons, and other various data that could be important for an advertiser to be able to target. And then on the app side, we've built an SDK. So unfortunately, if you don't have an SDK, the system can't work. Yep. It would be great to if it was just APIs, because it'd be a lot easier to onboard apps and app networks. But at this stage, it's an SDK that the app developer has to embed inside their app.
All right. And so do you have to, so what kind of interface do you have with the beacons? How does that work?
Yeah, so with onboarding beacons, we have to onboard the beacons directly with the beacon owner. So we need those beacon IDs, and then we label the various beacons in our system. And so it's as easy as long as you give us access to those beacon IDs, they can then be accessed by our third-party apps.
All right. And what kind of beacons do you work with?
So we're working with all form factors. Probably the most popular is the accent beacons. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with those, but they're compliant in all modes, from iBeacon to Eddystone to obviously just standard beacon mode for Android devices. But we're concentrating on, with beacons, it's great, but it's also looking at beacons where it's high density, it's multi-level, because that's where the real value of beacons come into play. So things like a beacon inside a mall is very valuable because the user could be on level 1, level 2, level 3 of a mall, and a beacon helps determine that. But with the Airmarket platform and the way that the SDK works as well, we can use GPS for locations and areas where there might not be beacons deployed, or we might not have a footprint in that physical location with a beacon.
All right.
So it's using two modes of analysis to determine where someone is. And
you talked about the different kinds of standards for beacons, but so you can use beacons that are in the clear. Obviously, if it's an iBeacon or a Eddystone UID beacon, or just a proprietary static beacon, you can use that. But can you use like the ephemeral IDs, Eddystone EID, and I don't know if Accent has a proprietary conditional access mode for their beacons. Do you link into those?
Yeah, so with the ephemeral, we've done some testing with Google and their Eddystone stuff. For what we're trying to do with advertising, we found Eddystone to be really clunky. And that just might be because it's early stage for Chrome and Google. But in terms of having to deliver advertising campaigns for brands, using ephemeral from Google is actually really difficult. So what we're focusing on with the advertising campaigns is purely iBeacon and then standard beacon mode for Android devices. Because our experience with Eddystone is it's just too unpredictable, and Google's keeping a lot of that data on their side as opposed to being able to funnel it through to a third-party platform like Airmarket.
Oh, interesting. So you're finding just basic reliability issues in not seeing the beacons? Is that part of the problem?
It's all of the above, Stephen. It's not seeing the beacons. The notification comes once, but then the next time you come into that range or that location or proximity of the beacon, it's not delivered again. Sometimes you have to be in that location for a set period of time for it to be delivered, even though there was no parameters set within the system for that to occur. So for us, the the vision of Eddystone was great when it started,
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of like communism looks great on paper, but in practice it doesn't really work out.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the feeling that I have towards Eddystone at the moment is, it'd be great if it played out like it says on the website and in the documentation,
Mm-hmm.
but unfortunately in practice it's still got holes like Swiss cheese.
Well, and to what degree is there, in reality, is there the concern about Google being in the chain in terms of having to register your beacons with the proximity API? I mean, they will manage the data for you, but I guess as long as you put the basics in there, you don't have to give them all the really valuable metadata. Do you have a way of dealing with that?
Our experience was that they still want to control most of the data and what's collected through their system. There are APIs for you to extract certain information, but it's nowhere near as robust as having your own system that's pulling that from the device via an app. The other issue that we found just from a user experience is the user has to go into Chrome and activate physical web.
Right, that's different though, isn't it? That's Eddystone URL, and that's using Chrome to browse beacons, as opposed to having, essentially an iBeacon. I think about iBeacon, and you basically have your UIDs and major and minor device numbers, and then all the beacon vendors, a lot of them who've been in this space have like proprietary conditional access. So Airmarket have their conditional access standard, and even
Gimbal.
Contact.io and Estimote now have their own proprietary thing. So it's all kind of different ways of doing the same thing, but it's nothing to do with URL. So, I mean, so putting the physical web is a wonderful thing, but probably not ideally suited to what we're talking about here. So let's just go back to those proprietary approaches. Have you had any experience with working with, I guess you, in a way, might be competing with Gimbal a little bit, but have you worked with any of those conditional access mechanisms that the beacon vendors offer? And have you had any better luck in terms of getting reliable results from them?
Yeah, so in terms of those like security keys where you need to match something to be able to access the beacons, like we've spoken to Gimbal and the likes of those guys, but we haven't had access to those because, as I said before, the market's early, it's fragmented, people are sort of figuring out who's who and who's going to win and so forth.
All right.
But yeah, like as long as you have access to some type of key on Gimbal or Airmarket side, you can access those beacons. And it makes sense for them that they're protecting it in that way because that gives them a, IP creation and things like that.
I guess, although really I don't think this market's about market share at the moment. It's about getting to critical mass. And I think that the way I look at it is it's a bit like the early days of the mobile phone networks. And I think pretty quickly, even if you're T-Mobile or AT&T, you realize you go into a rural area, you need a roaming agreement. You need to work with companies that you might be competing with for customer acquisition. And actually those companies make loads of money on roaming agreements, both the big companies and the small companies. So my hope is that we can all agree to work together, because the biggest challenge is just getting coverage, not fighting over
from a customer
share.
perspective, like the advertisers, they're like, this is too hard, so we're not going to bother. So the way that we look at it is like, remember back in the early 2000s, everyone operated their own website? And then Google just came along and said, we'll serve the ads and we'll just cut you in.
Yeah.
That's kind of like where beacons are today. You've got a lot of companies managing their own little infrastructure pieces, but advertisers just want to access the whole thing in a really easy fashion. So that's kind of the layer where Airmarket fits in.
So give me some grounds for optimism, because I hear a lot of people being pessimistic about this market, and it is really challenging. I feel like there's definitely, there's companies that have Shopkick is sort of in this market. They have their own app, so they haven't really succeeded in opening it up. But they've certainly they generate a lot of revenue, and they've got pretty big staff, and they got acquired for a princely sum. So that's kind of one sign that it can be done. And I see in market have what is 80 people, and they haven't raised a huge amount of capital, so they must be. And they've had a real focus on certain segments like grocery,
retail,
and now they're looking at bars and so forth. What are you seeing that's reasons to be cheerful? Part one.
Well, the reasons to be cheerful are all the advertisers and agencies that we meet when we go in and demo and we show them, a sponsored notification coming from a third-party app. They get super excited. So for us, that's great because ultimately they're the ones that are paying for it.
Yep.
And are going to deem whether it's successful or not. So in terms of step one, that's really exciting. The challenge though with advertisers is because this is quite new. It's a big step change for how they think about mobile advertising. Mm-hmm. So they're still used to desktop era methods of putting banners inside web pages and apps. Mm-hmm. And so that education process of, hey, that's still fantastic and you can still do that. But now you can do these things called push notifications where the consumer can be exposed to a brand's communications without having to be in an app. And in a particular moment like retail or I'm bored on the bus and I want to be entertained. So you could get something from, say, Netflix or Amazon for episodic content. Mm-hmm. And so that takes time. It's exciting, but going from not much revenue to how do we scale that up to get where it's really exciting from a revenue and a business perspective, it just takes time. Yeah. But the initial feedback from the agencies has been super positive, and then trying to overlay that with a programmatic story of you can do it in exactly the same way that you can do mobile banners or video ads, mm-hmm. Adds another layer of excitement because that's where all their dollars are heading in terms of buying. And
what is holding it back? If you had a magic wand and you could overcome one or two problems, what would be the one or two problems that you would take off the table that you think would energize the market more?
Well, I think to your point before is the fragmentation question is you've got a lot of companies in the field right now that are sort of holding their cards close to their chest, mm-hmm. And for good reason. But the angle that we're coming from is a rising tide raises all boats. Mm-hmm. And so at the end of the day, all we're concerned about is scale. Mm-hmm. And so our pitch to the likes of Airmarket, Gimbal, and those companies are, we don't see them as competitors. We see them as partners. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, if we can take an advertiser from X scale to a multiple of 5, mm-hmm. that benefits everyone in the ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And it just means that the more brands that are using that, the more PR you can do, and then the more comfortable other brands feel in making that step and investment into using beacons as a method of reaching consumers on their devices.
Yeah. So the thing I'm taking from that, the thing that is holding the advertisers back the most is just critical mass of coverage of all the key markets and the key segments that they want to address. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and it's more from the key concern for the advertiser is the app network as opposed to the beacon network.
Oh, really? Okay, because you can always do some kind of GPS type thing to get around.
Exactly, but at the end of the day, to reach a consumer, the app is the Trojan horse to being able to do that.
Yeah.
So without the app component, you can spend all the money you want on rolling out beacons, but if you've got an app with a tiny user base, it's a complete waste of money.
Yeah.
And so that's probably the priority for us as a company as well is onboarding lots of apps.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, and I think different companies will bring different things to market. You may have one of the players that just has a great beacon network but could do with more apps, and
exactly
others that have really great integration with these trading desks and and other components in that ecosystem you described. So I'd love to get your view of some of the other players in the market from a kind of perspective of co-opetition. I'm sure you've looked at all of them. What do you think of XAD, for instance?
Yeah, so XAD is interesting. So their core business model is banners inside mobile web pages and apps. Mm-hmm. And so we quasi-compete with them, but they're not doing what we're doing. Mm-hmm. They could, because they have lots of apps that they represent. I'm not sure how many of them have their SDK, for instance, but they could easily move into this space, right? So they're a competitor as well as a threat. Mm-hmm. But the people that we see within the ecosystem today, we see as friendlies, not enemies. And so when I say that, I'm talking about Swirl, I'm talking about Gimbal, I'm talking about Airmarket, I'm talking about Mobiquity, and the likes. And those companies have done very well in terms of getting a physical footprint of beacons out there.
Yeah.
And they've also done quite well on acquiring various apps to support those individual networks.
Yeah.
And so we see them as partners to grow the ecosystem together in exchange for revenue share on both the beacon side as well as the app side.
Yeah. And what about Unicast?
Unicast is interesting. So I would see them more as competing directly with an XAD. Mm-hmm. They're obviously aggregating beacon data to then be able to retarget consumers when they come into various locations. Mm-hmm. I think the challenge for Unicast, and I've said this to Thomas, is you need apps, because the beacon companies that you're integrating with don't have many apps. Mm-hmm. And so therefore the data that you're generating is not going to be as significant to use as what other advertising DMPs offer for clients, right? So
they're a good reason to work together. All right. Well, I'd love to get your predictions for what's coming down the pike. What's the future? But anything else that we should talk about with regards to your business? What do you think we've captured the essence?
I think we've captured the essence.
Cool.
It's a middle layer offering that combines beacons and apps for advertisers to use at scale.
Yeah. And so basically you want to talk to anyone that's got beacons, anyone that's got apps, and you're going to help bring them together with advertisers.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So, okay, we've got our crystal ball out. What, not necessarily directly related to your part of the beacon ecosystem, but what are your predictions for the future?
In regards to beacons themselves?
Yeah. I'd be interested in the market.
Yeah, well, you've obviously seen the various studies that are, from ABI and such that are saying, we're going to 400 million by 2020 in terms of beacons deployed out in the field, which is obviously great for companies that are operating in that space. I think the industry's going to hang on consumer experience or user experience, because it doesn't necessarily have to be a B2C offering. It could be B2B.
Yeah.
But it all stems from, and we learnt this with Tappet as well, is you have to create amazing, magical experiences with the end user.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you don't do that, it's all a waste of time, and people will turn off Bluetooth and uninstall the app and not be bothered. And so I think it's less of a technology play and more an understanding of what's going to add value to the people on the end of these things, which is the mobile devices. So,
and where's the big potential, do you think, and who's doing it? Which are the verticals that are doing a good job? And so I'm going to be moderating a panel on connected spaces at the Bluetooth forum, World Forum that's coming up. Beginning of April. And we've got basically a museum, San Diego Museum of Art. We've got we've got a sports
stadium.
Sports stadium that's going to be there, and we've also got someone from AT&T talking about the National Emergency Address Database, the 911 database, because my personal prediction is that's going to really energize the market, because venue owners will deploy beacons to bring down their insurance rates to manage liability, because if you have beacons, someone dials 911, emergency services will get there fast. So if I'm a stadium or an airport or anything like that, then I don't want to have on my conscience the fact that someone had a stroke and it took an extra 5 minutes for the emergency services to find them. And in my mind, the same way as the military applications were the reasons for getting GPS satellites up there, this will be the driver for pervasive beacon deployment, and then we'll figure out lots of ways of doing it. So anyway, that's my kind of plug for what NIAD are doing, and they're a client of mine, so I'm biased, but it's. I
definitely agree with you with the B2B solutions.
Yeah.
So a couple of companies that we know that are doing some really cool, exciting, valuable deployments are JC&Co, who are the outdoor furniture company.
Yeah.
They're using beacons as a way for them to be able to track and analyze people that service their out-of-home units.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of manually logging that down on a piece of paper, I was, on the corner of 34th and 3rd, and I had to, fix the outdoor panel.
Mm-hmm.
That is being automated via a beacon in the panel and an app that's loaded on the production guy's device. And so JC&Co can automatically determine that production representative was at that particular panel at that particular time.
Oh, fascinating. That's great. So I thought you were going to talk about them using it for targeting of out-of-home advertising, but
no, it's purely, so that deployment is purely operational.
Yeah.
And then I believe that Coke are doing something similar with vending.
Yeah.
So each time a vending representative goes out and obviously stacks the Cokes and fixes the machine,
yeah,
they've got an app that's loaded onto their work device,
yeah,
and that visit is being recorded automatically as opposed to manually.
All right, very cool. Well, that's that's fantastic, and obviously companies that are very focused on advertising, but this is about operational applications. And I agree. I think that we're going to see it in the volumes in terms of people that sell beacons, asset management, asset tracking, all that stuff is going to help to invigorate things. I've got to go back to my panel. So it's the 29th of March in the Santa Clara is at the convention center there, and we're actually going to have Kyle Ekman, who's the senior director from the Sacramento Kings. So that is the sports team.
Oh, nice.
I was having a senior moment there, and I don't want to waste an opportunity to plug that panel. So it should be an interesting discussion. Well, that's good. I like your reasons to be cheerful. I think whilst you're doing the hard work of getting programmatic advertising, there's lots of reasons for beacons to get deployed, and that will just make your life easier. And hopefully that we can get a bit of co-opetition going with all the players in this space, so that the market gets bigger faster.
That's right. For us, it's education combined with case studies and PR.
Yeah.
And from our standpoint, that'll grow the market exponentially over time.
Very cool. Okay, Andrew. Well, great to talk to you. Good luck in your ventures. I think you've obviously got some amazing experience and great start in terms of that app base. So congratulations and thanks again.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thanks for having me. Pleasure.
So what 3 tracks would you take to Mars, Andrew?
So 3 songs would be Rocket Man by Elton John, because we're on a rocket to Mars.
Yeah.
Second song would be Blue Danube by Strauss, because it has a very 2001 feel to it.
Oh, is that a film that you admire?
I love 2001 Space Odyssey, the original sci-fi.
Yeah, and incredible the quality of the graphics and everything for that era. I mean, it
timeless.
Looks, yeah,
timeless.
Yeah.
I recently saw it on the big screen, actually.
Oh. What, in New York?
Yeah, in New York. Yeah, there's a couple of cinemas that screen old films, and that one was on a couple of weeks ago.
That is up there in my top 10, top 5 films probably. And it's actually what got me interested in computers with HAL and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, you know the story about HAL, right?
I'm not sure whether I do. What's the story?
It's one letter after each of the letters.
IBM.
It's IBM, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Very good. And you know, if Siri was like 1/10 as good as HAL, then the market would
exactly
change. But it's
exactly.
Sadly,
and then the third song would be, if things went a little bit pear-shaped, we've got Requiem Mass by Mozart.
All right. Very good. All right.
No one's ever gone to Mars yet, right?
No? Well, not in real life, although that movie was pretty good.
Yes.
Matt Damon.
Oh, yeah, the Matt Damon film.